This is Nadisha in Chicago, and you're watching my channel, Knowledge for Quality of Life. Friends, last time we talked about LDL particle distribution test, which is Advanced Panel Cardio IQ. And we looked at it, how the particle distribution and sizes matters. Somebody in my comment section in the YouTube channel asked me, I believe from India, that what if the advanced panel distribution is not available in the country? And I was thinking when I was digging this literature at that time, because some of the countries don't have this kind of a capability to offer those kind of a test. So I came across some literature which I'm going to be sharing with you today. And with your standard lipid panel, you can assess where you are standing. But before I do that, I want to give you some pointers to keep in mind that, as far as when we are talking about cardiovascular disease risk, mostly people think that it's just a cholesterol, but it's a lot more than that. As I said in my previous vlogs, that cholesterol is a building block, which is required for each and every cell in our body. And I'll be sharing some literature here with the graphs particularly, and I'll be putting the papers in the link. If someone is interested, they can read it more at their time. And we will look at it few parameters today only as one of the best predictor of heart disease, which is triglyceride over HDL ratio. This ratio is very well known in the cardiac community of experts, and who believe that this is one of the best indicator for heart disease risk. And we will look at that as well. But as I said, that there are many factors that are at play. This is a multi-headed dragon, we are dealing with. And we have to address everything in a way that, I cannot address everything in one vlog, so I'll be taking few parameters each time and talk about it. So let me share my screen with you. What you are seeing here is a picture which comes out of the paper. It has small 6 graphs. Now this is age specific. This first one is 18 to 34 years old. Second one is 35 to 44, then 45 to 54, and then 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and then 75 to 99. Now, the blue dotted line is for men, and red line is for women. So now if you look at that, the point of intersection at hazard ratio is just like a mortality risk, is at 1 being the optimum. And as you move high, you increases your mortality ratio. Now, this is due to all-cause mortality. Remember that. This is not CVD only. This is not related to cardiovascular risk only. This is all-cause mortality. So if you look at it, that, as we look at all these graphs, there is something stands out to me, that basically the hazard ratio at 1 happens at 220. 220 milligrams for total cholesterol. Milligram per deciliter is a sweet spot. As you move away from 220, means greater than 220, your hazard ratio increases. Now, it doesn't mean that, total cholesterol more than 220 is going to increase the cardiovascular risk by its default, by itself. There are many factors are at play, as I said, that, and data says independently in the scientific literature that more than 70% of the events happen for heart attacks risk related to heart attack issues is when you have a normal cholesterol. So under 200, your milligram per deciliter increases your risk as well, because it's not a standalone cholesterol only which signifies one's risk profile. Because as we said in the earlier vlogs, that insulin resistance plays a big role, because this is another fact that more than 70% of the heart attack happens for people who are insulin resistant. So these two common factors, under 200, more than 70% risk, 70% of the people who get heart attack as insulin resistance. So it tells us something that, there are more things at play just by looking at the cholesterol. Because, as I said, cholesterol is a life, basically to sustain life. And each and every cell in our body needs cholesterol to thrive. Now, this standard panel test, which we get in the lab, which is 1972 year equation, which is given by 𝗕𝗲𝗹-𝗽 formula, which is total cholesterol equals to your LDL plus HDL, LDL for low density lipoprotein, HDL high density lipoprotein, and plus your triglyceride. Now here triglyceride is 1/5 of your VLDL. VLDL is very small, tiny LDL particles, which we spoke about as a small LDL, cholesterol. So now this is an approximated equation, and it has some limitations as well. Now, but when you do the advanced cardiolipid panel, you don't use this equation, for computation. You get individually all these numbers. Now, if you look at another thing in these graphs, that as we age, the risk profile gets flattened. The mortality curve at the tail end, higher than 220, it gets flattened. It means that your mortality risk gets lower. Hazard ratio is getting flattened at higher cholesterol. Now, we know that as we age, our body needs, fighting power against many pathogens, right? So as we age, our immunity goes down. So the cholesterol gets naturally produced more to provide all the raw material the body needs. And these graphs are depicting that. Now, if you look at furthermore that, this 220, the sweet spot I just mentioned, it's a comprise of total cholesterol, means your LDL plus HDL plus your triglyceride. Now, we don't have too much control over LDL, because, even though if I don't eat anything, let's say if I am fasting, just a water fasting, my liver is smart enough. Our nature designed us in such a way that, our liver is going to produce 75 to 80% of the cholesterol what body needs to function. So it's really doesn't matter that, what we eat. But yes, it does matter for certain people. They say that, dietary cholesterol, there's a blanket statement out there which a lot of people believe in, that dietary cholesterol doesn't make any difference. If you eat dietary cholesterol, then your liver is gonna produce less, because there's a natural compensation going on between your own body system, that it's gonna produce less, because now you have a dietary cholesterol. That is not true based on what I have read through the literature. There are certain genotype which I gave you a test, ApoE genotype in the list when we discussed about it, that there are people who carry one allele of 4, like ApoE 3,4 or 4,4. These folks produce certain protein in the body which metabolizes cholesterol much more quickly in their body, and it increases the cholesterol. On the contrary, the people who have allele 2, means 2,2, they produce a protein which doesn't dissolve or doesn't metabolize cholesterol that quickly. So they don't get impacted. Now, in my case, I'm 3,3, so I have an ApoE genotype 3,3, so I don't, increase my cholesterol even though if I eat 2 or 3 eggs. because each egg has 185 milligrams of cholesterol. But on the contrary, if somebody is 3.4 or 4.4, it may impact them, right? So it's not like one size fits all, So remember that this thing is very crucial. I cannot put more emphasis on this, that, we are all unique. We are all unique individuals. So what works for someone else may not work for me, and vice versa. So remember that this curve is total cholesterol. And as I said that, to some extent, I have a control over, manipulating my triglyceride and my HDL. Now, these two parameters we control, right, to some extent. And I'll discuss more and more in today's vlog and forthcoming vlogs that how we control that, because, I was victim of that as well. And it took me 8 years to figure it out that, how can flip the, pyramid in my case. And thanks God that, successfully I was able to do it. So let's look at the second slide here. Now, this slide is a long study of 16.6 years of study for about 40,269 men followed for this study between 1978 and 2010 by Cooper Institute. Now, they have divided into 4 groups here. What you are seeing here on the vertical axis, y-axis, risk of CHD mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality on the y-axis, and and on x-axis, you have a triglyceride over HDL ratio and divided into 4 groups. Now, first group, your TG over HDL ratio is less than 1.51. The second group is between 1.51 to 2.39. The third group is 2.4 to 3.9. And the fourth group is 3.90 and more. It's greater than 3.90. Now, what this HML represents here is high, moderate, and low fitness, respectively. Now, this curve, this graph is combination of 2 things: cardiorespiratory fitness and TG over HDL ratio. So it's a combination of 2 things. It's not about fitness only, right? So now, if you remember from the previous vlogs that, and your standard lipid panel, that triglyceride for male should be greater than 40, and for female should be greater than 50. And the threshold value for triglyceride allowed is less than 150. Now, in my opinion, particularly this triglyceride is pretty relaxed number, because if you take 150 over 40 for male, that gives you 3.75, triglyceride over HDL ratio. That 3.75 puts you in 4th group. And look at the 4th group. Even though you meet the criteria for standard lipids, your mortality risk is double. So they say that, if you look at the literature, they say that, your triglyceride over HDL ratio should be less than 2. That's the best number, but that's not the optimum. The optimum is, it should be 1. Means your triglyceride over HDL ratio should be 1 or less. The lesser, the better, right? So now in my case, if I give you a scenario, 8 years ago, that, my triglyceride used to be 92, which was, I was thinking that, I'm in the good books, because, it's way below 150. And my HDL at one point was 27 earlier in 2015 and 16. And, I did my separate vlog that, how I raised my HDL from 27 to almost in the late 50s. And now I just recently got 58. So now my triglyceride, it dropped from 92 to 48 the most recently. And then my HDL went from 27 to 58. Now you do the math, right? So my ratio, triglyceride over HDL ratio dropped to about 0.8, right? At one point, I was close to 3.4, 3.5. Now look at the disparity. So I was close to group 3 here, and now I'm in group 1. So it's doable. Now, this is a lifestyle issue, okay? And I'm not going to cover what things I did, because it's going to be too long of a vlog. And when I'll be talking about lifestyle, I'll discuss those things. Today, I wanted to give you this ratio that's one of the best predictor, and everybody should work towards this goal to be more. And if you recall my one vlog of metabolic syndrome, which when I talk about it, that this one of the 5 parameter out of in metabolic syndrome was triglyceride. So triglyceride is very, very big culprit. And if you can control triglyceride, because triglyceride and HDL varies inversely, okay, and it's somehow tied to our belly. So you remember that one of the other criteria in metabolic syndrome was our waist circumference. So if somebody's waist circumference is above bigger than the normal BMI, then there's a problem that your triglyceride is in the higher range, because you have a lot of visceral fat around your belly. And for females, it's probably mostly on the thighs and the buttocks. So the lower the if you shed some pounds, then your triglyceride is going to drop, and when your triglyceride is going to come down, your HDL is going to go up. Now, the weight lose phenomena takes about 6 months to 8 months to see reflection in the HDL. Triglyceride drops pretty quick, but it doesn't trickle down into the HDL that fast. You have to give some time, because some people impatiently see that, oh, my triglyceride dropped, but HDL, and this is explained very well by the literature which was published by Dr. William Davis, world-renowned cardiologist. I read him about 8 years ago. And I implemented on myself, and my HDL didn't go from 27 to 58 or higher overnight or over 6 months. It took about 1.5 to 2 years. And then at the same time, I saw the triglyceride drop pretty quickly by my alternative lifestyle. So this I wanted to share here in the group 1. If you see that, TG over HDL ratio less than 1.51 with, high fitness, the risk ratio, hazard ratio, mortality is 1. But if you have, moderate fitness, low fitness, means you are not active, you are not very, athletic, you are not doing any kind of exercise, even though brisk walk, you don't have to hit the gym, because, hitting the gym and doing the extra strength training, sometimes it's not good. We will talk about it in the next vlogs, because it creates high stress environment, and that creates another issue of atherosclerosis. So you've been seeing lately that, people who are spending 1.5 to 2 hours, in the gym, and they have a cardiac arrest. And one of the factor which is very, very common, that when we go through the strength training, and if we're creating a high stress environment, body goes through the stress, body doesn't know what kind of a stress to deal with. And this atherosclerosis is strongly tied with high stress environment. So a brisk walking 20 to 30 minutes a day, at a rate that your heart starts pounding, it's a good way of getting active. You don't have to hit the gym. So this number you have to keep in mind, that the high active fitness and low active fitness, your mortality is almost double here. And as you go towards higher TG over HDL ratio, of course, it's just triples and quadruples. So this thing you should keep in mind, that how things ties up in the holistic manner. Now let's look at this chart. Now this is to my friend who asked me the question that if the advanced lipid panel is not available in countries like India or any Asian countries or countries like Pakistan, what do I do? So look at this curve, and let me explain you what this curve is. So on y-axis, what you're seeing now, you have two curves here, two set of graphs here. One is for female, pretty much identical. There's not much difference here, but it tells subtle differences. So the second one is for male, and the top one is for females. Now in the y-axis, you see cumulative frequency, means probability of occurrence. And then here on the x-axis, you see triglyceride over HDL ratio. So I just spoke to you in the previous slide that the lower the triglyceride to HDL ratio, now these two set of curves here, one you see the dark triangles and one is the light triangles. These are the types of particle distribution. Now, phenotype A is the desirable type, means particles which carries the LDL cholesterol and moves through our blood system from point A to point B to the cellular level so that it can provide the raw material for the cell, for the functionality of all the processes in the body. So this is this type which is the phenotype A is desirable and phenotype B is undesirable. Phenotype B is small dense particle, which I give you an analogy like a golf ball, because when they move through the arterial system within the blood medium, there is a chance that it may get oxidized, number one, because of the smaller surface area. Number two, if it turns the corners of the arteries, it may pierce through the endothelial layer, and then it creates damage. And in the residence time for these particles in the blood system, which it floats around, is much longer, particularly when someone's HDL is lower, because HDL, what it does, it brings all the leftover cholesterol to the liver for recycling. Now, if the recycling is not going to done better, of course, those particles float around in the system and gets oxidized. Now, oxidized LDL is no good. So there is another test which I gave you in the list, OXLDL, which we will talk a little bit more in detail next few vlogs. Now, so if you look at, let's say if your triglyceride over HDL ratio is 2. Now, what you see at this line where my cursor is, so your phenotype B is almost probably 10% or 15%, right? And you have the phenotype A is a lot more than that. So you should be in this area. In this area means majority of bulk of your particles should be bigger, larger, fluffier, and fewer should be low, smaller ones, LDLP, with the small surface area. So in my case, I was initially, my triglyceride was 92 and my HDL was 27. So I was close to here. Okay. So, and my LDL, particle distribution testing showed that my total particles were in the range of 1,300 and my small LDLP was 666. So if I take the percentage, 666 divided by 1,300, it's close to 0.5, around that. But most recently, that 666 numbers, 666 number dropped to 182. However, my total particles remain almost same between around 1100s. 1100 and 1300 is not a whole lot difference. So it means that my cumulative particle size moves towards the phenotype A more than phenotype B. So I have only 10%. An expert says that your small LDLP divided by your large total distribution should be only 20%. Means if you take the total percentage of the particles in your lipid panel, advanced lipid panel IQ, your total particle size, total particle numbers, your small LDLP should be only 20% of that or under. The lower, the better, right? So now what it tells you here, for those folks who don't have this capability of getting the advanced lipid panel, try to keep your triglyceride to HDL ratio 2 or less. If you achieve that, I guarantee you that your small particles will take care of itself. Almost none, and your mostly particles will be on the fluffier side, big size, which creates less atherogenic profile than the smaller one. The smaller particles, more you have, your profile can be atherogenic, and that creates the plaque distribution, plaque buildup. Now, that's not the only reason. Remember that I've been saying this again and again. It has to do with the insulin resistance. It has to do with your inflammation, what type of diet you are eating, what type of oil you are using. Many things are at play, right? So we are addressing few things at a time. And as soon as we move forward, we are going to gather all the information, all the risk parameters, and then we'll try to wrap it up in a consolidated form later. So let me stop share screen here. So basically, I try to do in this vlog to give you enough information that, one of the best predictor of your heart risk profile is TG over HDL ratio, triglyceride over HDL ratio. And remember what I said, that these two parameters we can control. We can flip it. So I have always tried over the last 7 to 8 years, my maximum effort was not to quantify, not to lower the quantity of the cholesterol, but improve the quality of the cholesterol, right? Because, brain needs cholesterol. Remember that, brain is fraction of the body weight, but it requires 25% of the body's demand of total cholesterol. So 25% of the body's cholesterol need goes to the brain, when brain weighs only fraction of the weight of the body weight, right? So think about it that, nature has given this capability of producing cholesterol to the liver. There must be some reason. It's not by fluke. So this is the food for thought I'm going to leave with you here, and hopefully see you next time with next set of parameters. And eventually, once I'm done with all the parameters of risk, then we will move on to the lifestyle changes, which I made, which may work for you, may not work for you, because again, at the end of the day, it's your genotype which counts, right? So, when I start changing this diet business or lifestyle adoption, I didn't know, to be honest with you, what my genotype is. So I took a broader perspective, and then later on through the literature, I found out that, genotype plays a role, and then I fine tune it, because this is a journey. This is not like you move from point A to point B and you just stop, right? So I have been evolving over time, and everyone, we evolve over time, right? So we are not static person. We should be a dynamic. We keep constantly improving things to the best of our ability. Hopefully, see you next time.